mean, so it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like, they had hidden all their numbers. Like, Sam had
gotten away with it.
So many of these scams are like these issues of either regulators not having time, not having the resources. I'll have to. My feeling is offshore entities should not be. They're not subject to our rules. How can you allow offshore, like, yeah, I don't know. It's with regulators. They were all trying to. Sam was working really closely with regulators to try to get regulations passed, and CZ felt like he was cut out. So that stirred up this like battle between them, and ultimately, executives Ryan Salami or some. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, yeah, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam. Or, you know, something like Europe or something like that is you are subject to all these regulations which require you to be a little more careful.
Oh, those are pesky.
Yeah, there are some reactions, but not much. What I noticed is it resonated with people beyond the views, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like, I was just like, there was something different about the reaction to it. Like, and, you know, they're like, hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job. Like, be free like me. And I'm like, you're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, you're just that token, then you sell it off, and then the price plummets. So you thought you had a bunch of money, but actually it's worth nothing. Like, there's all these new scams that have emerged as a result of people getting interested in this idea of an alternative. And that video has aged so well because it's like people are like, oh, it was all true. But people were outright calling it a fraud. Like Mark Cohodes, he's a famous short seller. I hadn't really found my footing, but throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with like hucksters and fraud where, you know, when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer. Friedberg, shady. This guy,
allegedly shady. Dan
Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that. This guy.
What was his? I remember, but what was his? And in the FTX case, how much of it was getting celebrities to endorse the platform?
It's huge. This is what I wanted to say. Like, the more I studied, his whole thing was he did this thing with Ultimate Bet. So he was one of the lawyers. So there's this poker site called Ultimate Bet, and he got caught in this scandal where they had enabled this thing called is buying both, lying about it so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all. Yeah, tokens like is the individual, you can think of currency, right? So it's like the individual. So Bitcoin is, you know, you have Bitcoin, then you have, it's one of the cryptocurrencies. You have Ethereum, it's left. And ultimately, because they had lost billions of dollars, it left billions of dollars in credit claims, basically. They didn't have the money.
It's amazing that things with this amount of money can get this far sideways before anyone knows what's going on.
This is the problem with offshore accounts and stuff. Everybody. I ask him, and he doesn't want to talk to me. So, but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey.
Did you interview him before the scandal?
No, not before the scandal.
So it's like as it was going down.
As it was going down, he goes on all these Twitter spaces. He doesn't want to – he's doing interviews with that, right? It's all at some address. And so people were asking, like, you say you have all this Bitcoin, where's the Bitcoin? You say you have all this Ethereum, where's the Ethereum? But, like, it was very clear the internal conversations were they knew they were committing fraud. They knew they were doing things wrong. And this idea was, well, no one's going to catch us. Right, all these other guys buy into him,
right?
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other, being like, "Well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal."
Bizarre that so many people got duped, and I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. You know, I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things.
We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went away?
Annoying. So
we don't need that.
The famous example is like Coinbase is in America, and they have to file all these forms. They're a regulated entity. They're publicly traded. They're setting it up with like, I used to be broke like you. Well, that's a strategy. A lot of these guys were never broke. right? It's just part of the story you have to tell to be really effective. It's like he'd be afraid of being indicted, or I don't really understand why he can't go, but he can't go to America. So Sam was meeting with regulators. CZ felt cut out, like he was basically going to get a bad deal with crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else, but a lot is inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent, right? So this is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, like, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you and basically like, you know, shell games where you're hiding the money. Yeah. You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later, but you actually own a bunch like investment funds. They invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it.
And a lot of ums and ahs, and you just kept on him. It was amazing that first of all, it was amazing that he felt like he could. So
he called it Fiat at FTX. But it was a $10 billion hole.
What do you mean by mislabeled?
Well, it was on a spreadsheet, Joe. So he was put it on a spreadsheet for their balance sheet, and he mislabeled Washington. And I think there was like a tweet from Sam saying like, oh, like I'll see you the next time you're in Washington or something like that. But like, it was kind of a dig because he knows CZ can't go to Washington. Like he would be reputable people like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital. They all invest in this guy. Kevin O'Leary famously promoted it for like $18 million.
They gave him $18 million to promote it?
He says outright the proceeds of criminals. I mean, we know that these criminals do launder their money through a lot of these crypto exchanges, through mixers. It's just sort of you're like, it's this magic internet money.
Magic.
How do you get some of that? How do you get some of that magic internet money? Well, you have to go somewhere to buy it. And so it's a crypto exchange is where you kind of go. You put your fiat on. He launches Alameda Research first, which is just like this trading firm, which basically the idea here is we have some ideas. We're going to raise a little bit of money, and we're going to.
How does a guy like that not wind up getting indicted?
I ask myself that every day. There's so many.
Is it a matter of time, or is it he's?
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it, and you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been dark. Where it's like you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to be. Your name has to appear nowhere, and so that's actually you can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this, and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting.
Regulated, like if he was doing this, like Coinbase can't do this. Is that correct?
Yeah, Coinbase is much more heavily scrutinized. They actually have to file with the SEC. Calling that a fraud early. I have a buddy of mine. He goes by Dirty Bubble Media on Twitter. He's like one of the Anon Twitter accounts. He was calling it a fraud, and it just was kind of. I was just trying to find my way. I was just trying to like. Even before that, I had done a show where I was like trying to break down these topics. I was like, where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's like this is the tactic of these offshore companies is like you put everyone loses confidence, everyone sells their FTT tokens, no one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So
and sell off all his tokens. Would they be still solvent today or still in operation today? Would they not crash, or was this inevitable?
All the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just like, he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, like, you know, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's like even more cynical than just buying one party. They're like, look, I've been screwed by the banks. Every time the government's printing a bunch of money, where do I go? Right? You can understand the appeal, but it's just like you went. I mean, he was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane. But it's a strange time, man, to be covering crypto, because I tried to tell people for years that this scam problem, this fraud problem. It's this guy who drives a Toyota. So you go like, well, why does he need to scam me if he's driving a Toyota, right? Then it's like, which Sam Bankman-Fried did. Then it's like, okay, so before it's like if I send you $1 and then you send that dollar on, we can easily trace that back to me, right? It's like here. But if I send $1 to you and everyone's sending you $1 and then you're sending $1 to all, he's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and he of ads, like get-rich-quick schemes. Like you've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis telling you, they're like 25 years old telling you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million. Might be one of the first like trillionaires or whatever. Like he's such a great entrepreneur. They think he's such a genius. It might have been one of the A1Z guys. Or what are you saying in the terms of service that means that I can't sue you? You have all these terms of service that basically say none of what I'm saying is true. Like they say they can get you rich in the sales pitch, and then in the money system has to be safe. Like your grandma has to be able to charge back her credit card when there's a fraudster, right? Like or this whole thing doesn't work. You can't rely on people being technically savvy in order to on your dollars or whatever, euros or whatever, and you put it into this crypto exchange. They have a bank, and they work with that bank. Then they exchange that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two? And probably overly confident.
Yeah, it's pretty clear he didn't see like the full scope of the situation, especially at first. It seemed like he thought, he was like saying FTX US was, and it's like sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill like was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly like some Coinbase. It seems like they're legitimate, but so much of the problem with crypto is we don't know how much of this stuff is money laundering. We don't know how much of this stuff is like, you can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games and that's why I lost the money.
But they bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names and also reputable. There's some of these people making hundreds of millions of dollars. People are miserable at the end of it, and nothing happens. And that was the start of my show.
So you start just doing
offering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on
gay. So like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it? Like,
no. Basically, they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So hey, you're going to be the guy. Like reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's like they need to 5 minutes or 3 minutes. So I don't want to give off the idea that like there's nothing here. But the problem is that with the...
Or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA? I really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange. He thinks he can reestablish control because he's so smart. He is such a good liar that he's like, I can just lie my way out of it. So I think that's why he ultimately talked. His idea was, you can know their assets. So it's like a big thing recently in crypto. They'll say, hey, we're going to show you proof of reserves. What does that mean? They mean we'll show you on chain. All our victims would reach out to me. They'd be like, hey, I'd been scammed by this guy, and I didn't realize what was going on. And you showed me, sort of like how the whole scheme worked. Will fall for something doesn't mean you're safe. Like, you have to do, I hate to say do your own research because that's such an overused, like, scammy phrase. It's actually such like a phrase like that, it's almost useless.
Chemtrails.
Let me say this. If it's too good to be true, if they're offering market returns that you want to believe in, you go, man, I want to believe this is real. But even Western Union has been they've been getting kind of pinched a little bit, like, hey, you guys got to stop allowing all of this. But in crypto, because there's no on sticks or something. Like it was never, the problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? You're touch your money, obviously. That was the whole point. It's like, you deposit with us, we're not going to do anything with your money. It's your money. It's like a deposit. Like it's almost like a bank. Like you deposit with a bank. Your bank isn't supposed to go ahead and take your money. After the fact, he's like, he's still playing video games, and you're like, can you have the decency to get off the video game and talk to people?
So bizarre. It's just so bizarre.
Not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to get rich easily. So don't do that. Go do crypto. You got to get into crypto now. And then it became NFT. They've recently been shut down. But the idea was...
just the idea of putting your money into Tornado Cash.
Yeah, it's wild.
Is there a better...
Around, right? Kevin O'Leary's in. So you kind of think you're swimming safely with like other savvy investors. And that's what ultimately gets you to buy in. Bernie Madoff is very similar. They have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, hey, you put your money with us, we're not going to touch it. We're not going to move it. That's what FTX...
Easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot.
And then when you have them on, there's a lot of I wasn't aware. I'm not sure. I'm not aware of that. I don't know. There was all this hemming and
so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron. Shocking thing. And I think that shows, like, if you're running a shady empire, like, who's better than a shady lawyer to try to help you cover it up, right?
How did you get in?
Was going to undo sort of everything. Like, if you don't root out the scams, you don't find ways to solve that, this is never going to work. Because if you're great, I used to be just like you, Joe, but then, I found out that doing Amazon drop shipping is the way to make millions of dollars. And, I used to fail, but by these little tricks, Sam goes, oh, you won, like, our battle. And people were like, is it a battle when you lose billions of dollars of customers?
Why the celebrities are important. And that's why
huge part of it.
The connection to BlackRock is important.
Huge part. Yes, because they're the legitimacy that says, hey, I'm, this wire transfer, and it's kind of expensive to do these, like, you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is like, okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take like...
Wild. The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse. The things, it's insane. It's really... I almost wish...
Lack of regulation and the ability to send peer-to-peer, which means like you and I can just send money to each other directly, no middleman. There's also a really huge opportunity for fraud, scams. Actually, campaign finance laws, I've heard, are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in like the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want...
I watched the CEO, the new CEO, talk about it.
Yeah.
About him trying
That's John Ray. Yeah.
Trying to unravel it. And it's amazing.
Kept making the videos, and ultimately they never did. But I start doing that, and after I cover get rich quick schemes for a while.
Views about what? Like you didn't start doing this. You started doing just like a normal interview show?
I was just doing a normal interview show with a few of my buddies. And you can take that money and you can send it to what's called a mixer, which is this like fancy language for a way to like anonymize your transaction. Like you put a deal, but I'm from the Bahamas and I'm American, so that might be fine. I mean, everyone's always interested in the regulations benefiting them. The challenge now, though, is, a lot of people had he cleaned up on all his own customers. Just basically taking their money, like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out.
I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter Spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
money system. I mean, yeah, especially in our modern age, I mean, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person, the guy who enabled God or who helped cover up God mode. And he's like, well, I don't want to comment on other, people, or it's just like.
Well, how does he skate on that? Like, how?
It wasn't like he was some random fly-by-night guy. He was well respected in the Wall Street space. People thought he might take over the SEC after like the current person had stepped down. They thought he was going to take it over.
Wow.
Like
whiz kid, who you listen to him talk. He has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay. I'm not going to stop making these videos. I just wasn't interested. I was like, that's not my life. So I always wanted to sort of, have a voice. And so I started a YouTube channel just doing random videos. I didn't go start trading with it unless, obviously we have FDIC insurance, stuff like that. But like they didn't have that. They just take your money, go trade with it. And that's where the disaster started. Fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt. And he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. There's no Ethereum left. There's no Bitcoin left. You don't have the real tokens anymore. You just have your sort of nonsense FTT tokens, the tokens you invented. And he said, really taking that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that,
just kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see him in nice cars, and so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch. When you withdraw, there's nothing tying your Ethereum to your particular address to like this random external address because you send it to a different one. They kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying, like, we think they're insolvent because we had taken a look at their numbers and we said, there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the tokens. In the terms of service, they said results may vary. What's that about? Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately, it's like, and so I realized, like, there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology. And then what they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, there was fungibility between wallets. I'm a millionaire by the time I'm 23 years old. Just buy my course. My course is, $2,000. Pay me $2,000. I'll teach you to get rich quick. So this stuff went down, and a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of
involved in what you do.
It's a weird thing.
So when did you start your YouTube channel?
So I started it a few years ago, 2018, 2019. FTX said in their terms of service. So one of the really big problems was they actually weren't doing that, but nobody knew because nobody had a look at their books. Like it was very opaque. But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me. I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly. It was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that.
Caught. In my view, what he did was criminal. That's why I started. But it hasn't been prosecuted or anything like that. But he's on a leaked private call. Everyone can go listen to it yourself. It's just these guys basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys?
It wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to like be that successful that you're just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking
ETs for a while. But like, so I eventually like pivoted into this crypto direction and learned all about that. But it started just from a curiosity about scammers, and I wanted somebody to say nobody knew what was going on behind the scenes. So even though they said, like, we're not going to touch your money, as soon as you deposited Bitcoin, I mean, I talked to some of the insiders at Alameda. They said they had this backdoor. A lot of people found out about crypto the same time the mainstream media, everyone else did. So by the time they're actually investing,
it's too late.
It's too late. I think the most fair case you could make about, I started hearing about these tokens, and they're like, hey, selling courses, it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. They go oh, that actually doesn't work. Hey, drop shipping is very broke that showed that maybe they're not as healthy as they should be. There would have been a run on the banks and people would have found out. It's just when are they going to find out? It just, he happened to be the final straw, if that makes sense.
So someone would have...
If you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, CZ has connections to China. Maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here. Maybe that's a big deal. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren wrote a letter to them. They're being looked at much more closely. I mean, ultimately, all of these things are so opaque in the sense that they tracked his account. He's playing League while on calls about the failure of FTX.
Wow.
Just imagine the arrogance.
Is that arrogance?
Do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese bars. And I'd go because it was my friends said, hey, we have to get somebody. You want to go? And I was like, sure, I'll go. I was kind of fascinated. And you'd see these guys. Her and I believe Gary Wang were big executives. They're cooperating. They pled guilty. They're cooperating with the feds. I mean, they did this. Want to store your money somewhere else. How do you store it? So there's this idea of these alternative currencies that are kind of interesting. And then there's some arguments that hey, if you're someone like me, then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, 100x leverage. And one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director. And he goes, I don't have anything to do. I don't know. To their other friends, they're all saying it's okay. Let me put money in. And it's just a huge case study that just because other people, right? The inflation rate, I think, is 75% or something like that. It's an unimaginable, it's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time.
Down. Because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably. Each other on amphetamines and making billions of dollars. It sounds like a great story if it wasn't illegitimate.
Yeah, ultimately that's the problem. Sam was just hopped up on amphetamine that you this yield. He starts explaining this thing that sounds exactly like a Ponzi scheme. And so ultimately Matt Levine's yeah, this doesn't really make a lot of sense. But again, it stopped short what he said in one of the interviews. He goes, no one believes me when I said I donated dark because no one believes anyone would be everyone wants the credit for donating. No one believes that I just do it on the sly, Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy who he's the son of two Harvard lawyers. He's well, think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. We fight. One of the best ways to fight crime is at their wallets, take away their banking. And crypto has just really revitalized that because the fact that this guy, he got away with lying so long and perpetuating this image of himself as this generous billionaire. He's sort of the next Warren Buffett, that when everything goes wrong, crypto is... Sometimes national currencies aren't a great idea and you want an alternative. So look at the Turkish lira. Really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. They had a Serum token, which they control most of, launches FTX in 2019. And that's a crypto platform where, honestly, you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. They hate doctors so much, and it always seems to end up with a sales pitch. Like, it never was like, hey, let me just give you this free thing. It was like always like there's a catch.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't, at the end when you're like ready for this thing to go down, because I know as soon as I get on, it's going to end pretty quickly after. I said, let me on, let me ask him some real hard questions. Because all these guys are like, Sam, it's sort of like hard. You kind of have to disprove every single, like there's always a new like health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they... Actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame like onto Alameda and like, I don't control Alameda. I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore. You have Dogecoin. You have SafeMoon. You have FTT, which is what FTX was using as their native token. So a lot of these guys, you'll start a crypto exchange, make something work. If it's going to go to the public, you have to solve all these issues. And unfortunately, we saw crypto kind of go mainstream before they had balances. But oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like, I forgot. It's so silly. It's you eventually got paid out like $2 billion.
Whoa.
Yeah. Some of it was in this FTT token, though. So they have a bunch of FTT, right? And so it's like November.